Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and I got a follow-up to that little SteamOS video. I think Valve might have seriously put a real damage on Microsoft. And, somebody that has talked about Windows, Linux, Mac, all these things throughout several years, I will say, this is blowing my mind. So, ladies and gentlemen, a few days ago, I installed Valve's official SteamOS on this device. I also promptly uninstalled Valve SteamOS, and I switched over to Bazite, which was like the equivalent version that, it's basically the same thing, except it's more mature around all these other devices. Remember, Valve stuff is still very much new, okay? They just basically threw this out for people to play around and test with. There's a couple reasons why I uninstalled it. I wanted access to a greater feature set, and one of the things that I did not note in my Valve SteamOS video, which I found out after testing myself, was that apparently it was limited to like a certain fraction of power on your system. Now, granted, you could bypass this with like some loaders and like tools on the side, but I decided to just get rid of it, start fresh, start brand new, keep that same juicy Linux on this device, because some of the things that I've seen have genuinely blown me away. Now, what is the one thing that really blew me away was out of my own testing, just switching from these Windows devices and removing the Windows off of this and switching over to like Linux, whether it be Bazite or even SteamOS, has shown me two things that I found important. A, the general frame rate on some of these games were better, okay? We're talking like on like average 5, sometimes even like 10 frames per second better on plenty of games, okay? A whole range of games, which obviously for a handheld device, not your big giant shiny gaming computers, like bro, that is a huge improvement, okay? Generally on these devices, you want to aim for like 30 frames per second if you're playing something like Cyberpunk 2077, because that game is just such a heavy game anyways. So generally speaking, when you dip below 30, you can feel it. So generally you want to have that overhead, which I really feel like any of these Linux-based systems actually end up giving you over the Windows size. Remember, this is the same device that shipped with Windows 11, and switching over to Linux gave me already those performance improvements. But one of the things that I found super interesting, and I just to also clarify this with myself, I quickly also saw other tech reviewers, one of them notably being Dave2D, who actually also showed a similar graph in his video. So basically speaking, just from a quick understanding, running a Legion Go S, which is one of the newest like Legion Go devices, so you could have similar sizes of batteries over here. And of course, one of the things interestingly that they found out was that when you're playing something like Dead Cell, for instance, Dead Cells, which is a 2D roguelike game, gives you like 2 hours and 47 minutes, at least for his testing, on Windows. However, on Steam Deck, which is a slightly smaller battery, but also a slightly slower system from my understanding, 7 hours and 8 minutes, okay? That seems normal. I have seen these battery lives. 7 hours and 8 minutes. I have seen this personally with the Steam Deck, and you know what? That's one of the reasons why I love this device a lot, okay? Generally, when I'm on a portable device, I don't usually sit down with like it plugged in. Like I don't really play a device on life support, you know what I mean? If I'm gonna play with something plugged in, it's probably gonna be like a PlayStation or an Xbox or even my PC. Like this is meant to be taken around with you and played on the go, hence portability. But what was interesting is the same device that was giving him 2 hours and 47 minutes suddenly also started giving him 6 hours and 12 minutes. Obviously, not as high as the Steam Deck OLED, but then again, I believe this device has a stronger system in general, so it's probably going to sap a little bit more power. Ladies and gentlemen, when you're getting big improvements like that, it's worth noticing. And even across the board, looking at things like Cyberpunk 2077, which, yes, on the Steam Deck, you're looking at 2 hours of battery life, which is honestly more than expected. You're then looking at losing to 1 hour and 31 minutes on Windows, but you then gain like 20-something minutes with the Linux side of it. So not only is performance just better, but battery is also better as well, too. Also, let's not forget that sleep suspend that I keep talking about. That ends up working a lot better underneath Valve SteamOS, or really any Linux-like OS. Remember, with Linux over Windows, Linux is an open platform, so generally speaking, if Valve does something that's really amazing across the board, it's probably going to make it to the mainline kernels, the mainline, so people are going to be willing to adopt a lot of the improvements. It's a group effort, not just one big company working at it. So, to be honest with you, okay, the last couple days has been pretty mind-boggling, okay? Valve has actually seriously led the way, paved the way for one of the biggest hurdles in, like, operating systems to finally not be so much of a hurdle, right? Now, look, at the end of the day, there's a million other things that you use like systems for, but obviously gaming is a pretty important reason, especially if you're following somebody or following me on this channel, because chances are you give a shit about video games. You give a shit about playing games on your computer. And granted, I'm sure a lot of you guys watching have these handheld like Steam Deck devices, Rogue Allies, Legion Goes, and I'm sure you guys care about having the most frames and the most battery life as much as everybody else. I really think the last thing that really needs to happen in all this that could really absolutely slap Windows down is losing anti-cheat. Now, anti-cheat's like the last big hurdle, and obviously I've shown this list before, but there's a lot of games that work underneath like Linux or Mac even, right, with anti-cheat solutions. So you can play games like Halo Master Chief Collection on your little handheld devices, especially online. I know I do. But if you try to play something like Fortnite or Battlefield or Apex Legends or Valorant, some of the most popular games out there, these just do not work. Or sometimes they used to work underneath Linux until like things ended up changing. I really feel like the last big hurdle is this. The day people can start to play their anti-cheated games like Valorant, like League of Legends, like Call of Duty, like Rainbow Six Siege is like the day where I think most gamers don't necessarily even have a real reason to stick to Windows unless they're in there for like the super intensive like upgraded technologies that are like still somewhat exclusive, right? Like I'm talking about like the most exclusive frame generation stuff, maybe some ray tracing nonsense, but that's all slowly coming over to the Valve Linux side anyways. Which again, all of this is super duper mind-boggling to see. You know, Valve is one of those companies where they did like a super wild chess move. Like you might be wondering, Mudo, why the fuck would Valve, release their software on all of their competitors, right? Like this Rogue Ally is a competitor to the Steam Deck, okay? These are two competitor devices. Valve would prefer you buy this instead of this. But you have the option, and you can take Valve's amazing software and now run it on their competitors' devices. And obviously, it's not because Valve is this altruistic, we give a shit about everyone company. I mean, there is an aspect to it, but they're a business at the end of the day. You know, switching over to SteamOS or Bazzite or anything, first things first, it gives you Valve Storefront right on your system, okay? So like, if you're ever considering, man, where do I buy this game? Do I use the other launchers? I mean, that might be a bit of a hassle to set up. I mean, if I can just buy it right on Steam, I'll just buy it right on Steam. It just works out of the box. So by providing your storefront to effectively every single manufacturer in this hardware space of handheld gaming PCs, you basically have already gotten a significant leg up in this one big facet of software industries as compared to Microsoft. Now again, looking at how performant and how efficient Linux is on these devices, it kind of just blows me away why Microsoft has kind of just not cared about this, right? Like obviously there's rumors about Xbox making like a handheld gaming system to compete with the Steam Deck. And I'm sure every like single gaming manufacturer is thinking of doing it just because of how popular the Steam Deck is. And not even just how popular the Steam Deck is. The Steam Deck is like nothing compared to like the Switch and especially the Switch 2. So clearly these companies know that people love playing handheld, right? Like people would love to play something like Expedition 33 in the palm of their hands instead of maybe even hooked up to a big giant TV, right? Like some people just love the ability to take a video game with them, connect it from their television or even from their main system all the way anywhere out in the world. I think that's one of the reasons why these devices have been ultimately so goddamn popular. But to look at how much of an improvement just beta software at this point, right? Like software that's not even meant to be a completed released product yet. Remember, Valve SteamOS has just been allowed to install on other devices, right? Like Valve is pushing for it, but I don't even think Valve or really anybody would consider SteamOS to be a completed finished product right now. There's literally only one other official product that has it shipped day one, and that would just be that Legion Go S. So again, Valve, I think, has seriously delivered a pretty heavy kill shot to Microsoft in that for the amount of times that Microsoft being the sleeping dragon, it's just shocked me how they have not gone out of their way to at least create something efficient, at least under Windows 11, to match up to whatever benefits, Valve's version of Linux, or just Linux in general, is providing, right? Like, a lot of the actual performance improvements, the lack of bloat, the actual efficient battery life now, the actual efficient use of your processors is mind-boggling. And I think for a lot of gamers who are out there buying a device now, like if you go to the storefront and buy like that Legion Go S, the fact that you save, I think it's like $50, maybe $100 on that Windows license, and you somehow end up getting a better product out of it is still awesome. It's one of those things that are like, once people see the savings on their wallets, once people actually see like, hey, this is a good product, this is something that works, it's something that just works out of the box, is all you effectively need, right? A couple of years ago, like I would say 4 or 5 years ago, when I was talking about things like Linux, explaining to people that playing a video game underneath this, day one even, right? Like, especially when a brand new game comes out and it works out of the box on devices like the Steam Deck or even like a Linux computer, would have been just a pipe dream. I distinctly remember, like, I think it was 5, maybe 6 years ago, running a game like Death Stranding underneath my Linux PC wasn't exactly a day one endeavor. You had to wait like a week for the entire community to catch up, fix the game themselves, and release it. And now it would shock me if a game didn't work on Linux out of the box day one. So again, that's how much of an improvement that we've had. And I feel like a lot of thanks really goes out to, again, Valve, right? Like, it's their effort with Steam, with Proton, with their versions of Linux, that they've actually pushed so many things where for most people, right, like having that competition, having that level of like, having that alternative is finally there. And not only is it finally there, but it's also mind-boggling, again, that when you install this over the bloated Windows comparison, that you not only get a more efficient system, but somehow the games, the hardware just gives you a better life, Like, it's mind-boggling for me as somebody to see in some of these like mid to low end games that I was able to get like an extra 2 hours of battery life out of this device. Had I just, not installed Windows, I would have probably been like sitting with this device and getting like maybe a maximum of like an hour to 2 hours in general. So a lot of the benefits that Valve has done have just basically shown across the board right onto this device. And it's basically made it so that, look, unless I was playing something that was like really anti-cheat intensive, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that play shit like Destiny 2 on this, or Call of Duty even, right? Like, I'm sure this is definitely somebody's like go-to Call of Duty Warzone machine. Like, just to have COD in your hands is probably a huge deal to some people. But if you're not playing like an anti-cheat enabled game, right? If you're just somebody that's a single player gamer, or you're playing a litany of games that now support Linux with their anti-cheat, there literally is no reason for you not to gut your device and just switch entirely off from Windows. Because just the benefit to the performance and the battery life on these is insane. Now, obviously, I wouldn't say that that translates one-to-one just on the desktop side because of every single bit of hardware difference that is out there. But even like when I was looking at this stuff a couple days ago, even games like Cyberpunk 2077, for the first time ever, across the board, have been giving me better frames and better controls over my actual Linux system as opposed to Windows, is just the mind-boggling experience to be seeing, right? I think the day of Microsoft dominating with their operating system is over. And you know what, to be honest with you, like if we're going to take like every bit of reality aside, I don't even think Microsoft really gives too much of a shit about Windows anymore. To be honest, from my understanding, a lot of the money that Microsoft makes is usually in their cloud, Azure, and a bunch of other services. But when it comes to Windows, it's like the amount of bloat that they've thrown into it over, especially the last year or two, right? Especially as long as Windows 11 has come out, I think has finally bitten them on the ass, right? Like for most people, there's no reason why you wouldn't at least entertain the thought of at least trying something like Linux out. Or even if you're somebody that's a professional user, why you may not even consider switching to Mac at this point, which, at least in my experiences, have been far more stable than Windows 11. And as far as professional grade software is considered, there's always a Mac equivalent, if not the exact same software, just directly ported over. I think that reign of Windows dominance is out, and I think one of the last few things that Windows really had the advantage over was gaming. And I say the last few things it still somewhat has the advantage over, because as long as anti-cheats are still a thing, and as long as some really new exclusive technologies are still locked to Windows, it still is the dominant platform. But I think the biggest kill shot that Valve can do, and I mean, I'm serious about this kill shot, if they can solve that anti-cheat problem where the games that people primarily play online can now work across the board, would be the absolute final boss, the absolute ending. There would be no reason to stick to Microsoft's bloated Windows when there exists so many other clear distributions of Linux out there, especially Valve SteamOS. If this launches for the general public, especially on desktops, and it supports a lot of the stuff that we've been missing, could seriously be like an actual mass exodus. And I'm not joking here, at least from a gaming perspective, from Windows all the way over to Linux, right? I've always said like brand power is important, right? As somebody on YouTube, what I'm telling you guys, you probably want to consider switching over to like Arch or Linux Mint. Again, these are like little Linux distributions. They're not, you know, hey, this is Steam, the software that we use on a day-to-day basis, right? Like this is like basically the entrenched software for gamers. The moment that Valve releases SteamOS for the general public, you know, this actual big competitor, this other multi-billion-dollar monolith company that we can all at least trust on supporting this piece of software for now and the near future. And even if Valve abandoned it now completely, it's not as if there doesn't exist an entire community of Linux developers and maintainers that would keep this stuff alive for the long term. That is all people really need. As long as you have like an actual brand attached to SteamOS, obviously, an actual competitor, it would absolutely be the kill shot for Microsoft Windows. And the more I use SteamOS, the more I try around with it. Like, it's not perfect, obviously. It's not even a released product completely. But right now, in its infancy, seeing the amount of massive advantages that I'm seeing on devices like this, devices that still have a ways to go to support it, is mind-boggling, all right? And it is something that I cannot stress any further. If you want to actually, like, you know, get more out of your devices and you can give up some anti-cheat, you know, punishing games, this might be the way to go. All right, trust me. Being able to play something like some of the newest Star Wars games, even games like Battlefront 2, which is going through such a wave of popularity on your handheld device with better battery life and better performance, is kind of all you need. It's crazy shit to see. Ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and yeah, wanted to make this update, man, because I did not expect the results that I was seeing. I am out.